All right, at this time, I'd like to call the budget work session to order. We'll stand for the invocation.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you again for a beautiful day you've blessed us with, Lord. Lord, as we just go into this meeting, we ask you to lead and guide and direct us and just make all the decisions that's best for our county and the citizens in it. Lord, just thank you for everything you've done for us, and we just ask you to give us safe travels on the way back home. Lord, just ask to lift up the parish family to you as they go through their time of loss, and Lord, just give them peace as they're going through this, Lord. And there's so many things going on in this county, Lord. We just ask you to just take over. Lord, just ask you to be the leader for us and guide and everything goes through. Lord, just ask forgiveness where we fail, and in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Pledge. Pledge allegiance
Pledge
to the
to
flag
the flag
of the United States
of America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. At this time, I'll just, in case anybody's watching live stream, Mr. Mendenhall is here by phone. He is still recuperating from his knee surgery, and we've got Wayne Barneycastle here on Skype, so they are here in attendance. So at this time, I'll ask for the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the first item is the adjustments to the recommended budget, and that's what we'll talk about first today.
And Madam Chair, if I may just real quick, just to clarify, well, Mr. Barneycastle's not here, so there's no confusion. His grandson had come down with COVID, and he's trying to make sure he's not feeling sick, correct, Barneycastle? That's correct.
Yeah,
So he's just trying to be,
Okay.
just trying to keep us all safe here. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you for that. All right, Shannon, turn it over to you.
So there's just a couple of items, just like with every budget year, that once you start looking back through it and kind of decide there were a couple of things that got missed as the final recommended budget was put out. So just a couple of items, the social services, I think maybe finance got word that this family caregiver program is funded through the PTRC and not offered this year, so that's going to be an adjustment of $22,315 from the expense line item. And then EMS, when last year in the budget, you all approved for there to be a quick response vehicle put in the Francisco area with a vehicle that we already had, and to try that program with part-time staff. It took a long time to get that figured out. You recently approved the contract with the fire department in Francisco for that. Still has not been tried yet with the part-time help yet. But in this budget, EMS had put in their budget with another vehicle to be leased. So we took that out and put in a vehicle. They're going to use a vehicle they already have. But in their regular employees line item, those positions were in there, and we did not realize that when we were finishing up the budget. So we pulled those 3 full-times out for them to try that with part-time like it was originally approved in last year's budget. That's something, if you want to talk more about, we can, but we just felt like maybe the first year we should try it the way it was approved last year before we go into adding additional staff for that. And then on the jail one, we got a budget. There was a grant that we were working on close to time of the budget that was not for sure coming through. Not long after we did the budget, we got an award letter stating we were going to receive that grant for $89,500, so we had to add that into the budget. It is also a reimbursable grant, so we'll get our funds back once we expend those funds. Same thing with emergency management. Just received that the other day that they're getting this grant in $306,578.24. Also a reimbursable grant that we'll receive back once we spend those funds, but all things that will affect the budget. So the $155,772 in EMS would actually be removed. So that will be a savings in the budget as far as what's coming out of the general fund contribution. The other things are just pretty much the 2 grants have to be put in both items as far as revenues and expenditures, but we'll be getting those funds back. So those are the only adjustments that we have at this time, and then if there's anything in those items that you all want to discuss, we'll be glad to answer questions on those.
Okay. All right. Do board members have any questions about those items?
What's the grant for, the last one, the 4306?
Emergency management.
What's
You
it
want to
for?
talk about that a little bit?
It's for Brandon and Scott, who worked on this grant, which was pretty honorable, actually. It's, we were top 3 out of the state of North Carolina to receive this grant. And it's for Search and Rescue Aquatic Project, which was $177,300, and then wildland search and rescue, which was $129,278.24, which is totaling to $306,578.24.
Okay.
We just,
Excuse me, say that again?
Yeah, Grant, I'm being here a minute on that part. I know Rick was asking about that. All that equipment that he got on that grant, all that came out yesterday, search ahead for the juvenile with Blue Creek. So every piece of that equipment that he asked for in that grant was brought to our county yesterday.
Oh, okay.
That's good to know. I
Crews-
saw
crews
some of
would
that.
Need it then.
Yeah.
It's a definite need for our county, that's for sure.
Yeah, I saw some of that footage, and I saw it said, the boat said High Point on it. One of the boats.
Brandon and Scott applied for this and get it.
All right, sounds good. That's very good. At some point, maybe at a board meeting, we could recognize them for that and share that information. That's really good information. Yep. Okay. So no other questions on the adjustments to the budget that Shannon just read us?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I hate to ask this, I can hear, this is not related to a question, but I can hear the commissioners speaking. However, when our county manager, Ms. Shaver, is talking, I don't know if she's too far away or I know where she usually sits, but I'm having difficulty hearing her when she speaks.
Okay, we're moving the microphone thing around a little bit.
Okay.
we moved that microphone now. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you better, yes.
Okay, we'll try to speak up a little extra too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the budget adjustments, and the next item is the budget general discussion. Do you want to start us off, Shannon, or do you want me to ask if
Well,
anybody has any questions or concerns, or?
I think at this point, you all have had, almost a little over a week to look over everything. So we're hoping today just to get some feedback from you on what you think, what's your, anything you see that you don't like, you do like, anything you want to see different, us to work up any different numbers on anything you want to add, take away, just general feedback from you all today to help us move forward for the next budget meeting.
You want to start?
I'll be glad to. Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess my number one topic would be the ARP funding. I'm fine with everything you did in there with the ARP funding so far. But I have a concern that if I think we end up with your recommendation leaving $6 million something unbudgeted, just kind of hanging there. And as I understand it, and if you'll clarify this first, I mean, the way I read the budget message and everything, we can do about anything we want to with this. We can supplant the budget, just use it just like it was general fund.
General governmental services.
Did anybody give us that in writing, that we can do that whenever we get audited?
School of Government.
Yeah?
They're recommending we do it that way, as a matter of fact, versus other scenarios.
Okay.
If you get under $10 million.
Okay.
Receive more than that, they're recommending a different plan, but for us, that's what they're recommending.
Oh, okay. So it's just like, we treat it just like general fund then, and they'll back us up when we get audited. Okay. Well, the concern I have then is that we have that $6 million hanging out there, and I worry that somebody will, if we don't do something with that, somebody will come and try to take it, especially if things get, if the chaos continues under the current federal government and every metric is going haywire and projected to get worse as we go into the summer and the fall. We've had the state take our fund balance away before I got here the first time, but in any budget I've ever been involved in, any time you had money that's not spoken for or allocated, it's a target, basically. So I think I would like to have a discussion with everybody on how we do that ARP funding. I would recommend that we do everything that you said with it already, that we budget it, the rest of it. And I would, I think one really good use for it would be to use for matching funds for grants. So I would suggest we think about, like for instance, on the internet stuff, in 2 years the maps are getting updated. So obviously the landscape's going to change and probably create more opportunities for grants, I would think. I mean, if there's more, if they identify more people that are unserved or whatever. So if we set a certain amount aside, and I'm not sure what the right amount would be, that we could use for matching funds for future internet grants or any other kind of grants that we see on the horizon. Maybe we're working with some now that you guys may be looking at something now.
There's one that's the rural transformation grant that we've been talking with Eddie about. He's working on a pretty large project for revamping some other space that he sent an email out recently. I think he copied Sonia in that email too, that it will most likely require some funds that he was hoping we could use some ARP funds for. Not a definite yet, but it looks like it would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars needed in some matching funds for that when that comes to fruition. So that's one thing. And one thing, just really fast, where that's worded in there a little bit, where it says this leaving the 6.4 million available, we are recommending using over 2.7 of that 6.4 in this budget, so it wouldn't technically be.
That's right, I remember that.
It's 2.4 for the internet expansion
Did that
project.
too, yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
2.7, so the difference in those two, which
Yeah,
is still
so that's
a
about-
good amount of money.
About 4 still, right?
Yeah,
or
still
something like that.
close to 4.
Or 4. Yeah, so then if we could do that, and if we could be specific about which grant we're holding it for, that would be even better in the budgeting. And then the other thing I would do, spend the rest of it
Yeah.
on probably these capital projects that we've got going, because once we spend it, they can't take it back from us then.
Yeah, and I mean, we're just freeing up other funds and reducing debt for later. And there's a few things in here that we didn't pull from ARP that we still could, as far as like the difference in the funds for finishing up the Green Box site in Walnut Cove, the difference in the funds for the Pinnacle site, finishing that up. There's also things like,
Election
Elections building, yeah.
building and animal shelter. Why not just buy them both out of it?
We thought the same, and we just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
put it out there with some things left, but yeah, the same. And all those things are not gonna be future debt you're gonna have, and they'll be finished, and that way the money is allocated, and we don't have to worry about losing it.
Yeah, so that'd be my thought process, and I don't know how much we want to hold for matching funds versus how much we would spend, but
Yeah.
I think that'd be a safer way maybe to approach it.
Absolutely.
I do have, when we get to it later, another question at some point, but I'm really having a hard time with how much that animal building cost.
That's the current cost of everything as far as the prices for construction and worst case scenario.
I think we need to relook that maybe. That's almost too much to spend. But I mean, I'd just like to, I guess, did Perry already come explain that to us? I can't remember.
We talked about it not in detail, but when we first brought that first number up, and we
Yeah.
formed that animal shelter study group, then we stayed on that same number.
I'd like to maybe just have another discussion on that and see if we can de-scope it somehow or do something, because that's just an awful lot of money to spend on that. So that's where I was coming from on the ARP stuff, I guess. A totally different subject. If you guys, for the next meeting, when's our next budget meeting?
Week, I think.
We have a public hearing Monday at 7, and then June the 9th at 6 is your next technical budget meeting. next
Okay.
Thursday.
If y'all could do I'd like to see a turnover analysis, personnel turnover analysis by department. Not by names, but just numbers, and then also annotate that with the reasons the people left, not by name or specific person, just the general reasons that so we can look at each department, see where this is, do it since if you can, since the implementation of the pay study. And so we can see each department, how many left, what percentage, and then what reasons they're leaving for. And you should have that, I guess, from exit interviews and whatever, so.
I sent something sort of like that after our first budget meeting, I think in March. It may not have been encompassed all of that, but it was a turnover report. It may
Yeah.
not have encompassed everything that is, but.
I just want to see if there's certain areas that need to be targeted with any kind of special
Yeah.
treatment or whatever based on what's going on with those individual departments. You want me to keep going for a while, or? Got 30 things written down, so.
Well,
That turnover analysis does, I'm not going, I asked them about coming to the meeting and they've not gotten back with me yet, but I did get some information after we already finalized the recommended budget and put out that I believe we're going to be, maybe even next week, having somebody from the sheriff's office come and talk a little bit about when you're speaking about specific departments. And there are some turnover issues with the sheriff's office and with the jail that have been ongoing and kind of gotten
Yeah.
worse in the last weeks. So
Okay.
there will be some information coming. We've been looking at some of the ways to sort of eradicate some of that and coming up with solutions, but I've not heard back from them yet as far as today. They don't think they got anything together to come today, but it might be next week. So just
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm interested in,
Put that on
for
your
all the
radar.
departments, yeah.
Yeah.
go ahead with your next couple and then
Just
we'll.
stop me when you get ready. Then you have, you said something about doing all the green box sites with the ARP money. Are you doing part of it now and part of
Well,
it?
we've, in this budget, we've got the $250,000 SCIF grant for the Walnut Cove site, it's approved for that. And then the Pinnacle cost was about $300,000. We had that in the budget as financed for the rest of those, both of those, but as an option for if you wanted to do that with ARP funds, we could do the rest of that with ARP funds.
That's what I would recommend too, if
I'd like to do that.
the rest of the board wants to do that. Just a quick question, I think I'm confused on this because I looked it up in the budget too. I thought the 4-cent fund also received some revenue from the lottery, but you're not showing that, so that's not true.
I don't think so. The lottery, what we get from the lottery is $450,000, and that strictly pays that debt. There's I don't think that flows into the 4-cent fund.
Okay.
Do you remember that it was there?
Yeah, I thought that was one of the revenue sources for it because it's paying school debt off.
Yeah, it does pay the debt, but I don't think it technically.
I'm just
We
curious
verify and say, but
if
yeah, I don't
y'all
think it was technically.
tell me what the flow of that money, that lottery money is. I get questions about lottery money all
It
the
used to
time.
be more than double that, and it reduced down to that 450 on what we got for the debt.
Okay, and next topic is, do you have, and these are questions you don't need to answer now, just next time maybe. Do you have any, with EMS especially maybe, or other emergency services, or any department, do you have any where you're paying enough overtime and comp time that it would justify another position instead of it's costing more to do it that way?
EMS overtime, of course, is a large number, but
Yeah.
that's mainly because of the true time and a half, and they're going to get that time and a half generally because of their schedules with what they work with the 218.25 and then the 262
Yeah.
on the other months. So even adding additional personnel, they're still going to get that same amount of overtime. In certain departments, the overtime was up for like jail, but that's been because they've been so short-staffed. So yeah, some of those would be nice to have extra positions, but filling those positions would be the deal. But we can get a little more data on that, and we talked about that even with the sheriff's office. It would be nice to, if you get into the point where you're paying so much in overtime, could you add people? But if you can't get those people and retain them, sometimes you just need to compensate the ones that you've got here for their time worked.
Okay, yeah, just that's just a thought.
Yeah.
Could you explain to me what y'all are doing with the new finance software that you're purchasing in there, Lisa? What's that all about?
Well, we've had a demonstration on it so far, and that's as far as we've gotten, but we're thinking next year, in this
It's going to
budget year.
streamline a lot of what we're currently doing manually.
What's the name of the system you use now?
It's City Suite,
Still gyms.
still
Gems.
but it's an upgrade. But it's a web version.
Would this still be Jim's?
Yes. It's
Oh, okay. I thought it was replacing Jim's. That's that maybe. So.
It's from Harris. Who's
Okay.
also,
But it's all web-based, cloud-based.
Is it designed where you won't have to use spreadsheets as much?
yeah.
Is that part of what it is?
Yes. Our goal is not to have spreadsheets for the public.
Okay, yeah, that was my exact next
Be all
question.
system generated.
So the budget will look different under this system then?
That's our goal.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got a lot of
and
human error.
What's the price of it or cost of it?
With that, right now.
No, it ain't cheap if it's finance
No, but
software.
that's why
but-
we put 500,000 in there. It depends on how much data we bring over from the previous years.
Mhm.
If we bring like 2 years worth of GL information or whatnot, I think they say we have to have 5 years of employee data to come over. It's so much per year. But,
500,000 was the
Yeah.
worst case scenario
Yes.
that IT provided from the cost.
Okay.
But it would also include having,
we're gonna have an employee portal where employees will be able to log in and look at their own W-2s, look at their pay stubs.
Would y'all like at the next meeting, just bring a little overview of what that is, what all that's gonna do?
And also, I think
Help
there
us
was
justify
something
the cost
that
of it.
even if you didn't go to this new system, there's something you're gonna have to spend coming up.
By the end of 2023, we're gonna have to buy a new server, but they're no longer gonna host the system we're currently on.
If we don't upgrade the system. If we upgrade the system,
You don't have to buy that.
Correct. That was like a $200 and something $1,000, I think $289 or something cost.
That's a cost avoidance then.
Right.
Basically.
And going ahead and we've had that same software for 20 plus years.
99 for.
Yeah, I know.
Well, sounds like it's time.
There's a lot of there's a lot of software too out there now that you can have it where it talks more to the other departments, like HR, for instance, when they're entering things in, it would automatically go over into parts of it. We don't have that capability now. It's all has to come from one office to the next and be manually.
Yeah, would this one do that too, this new
Right.
software?
This would be sort of cohesive and talk to each other. When you enter it in one place, it automatically uploads over here instead of having.
If you have that cost avoidance you just said, I don't have any doubt that there's a need for it. I was just kind of to understand it and everything. We need to make that whole process easier if we can. so.
Absolutely.
Are the financing you're talking about doing just generally across the board for buildings and things like that, would that be where USDA would be the first place
Yeah, that would
you'd
be the
go?
first route we would try to take as far as like if we end up doing something with the courthouse, for instance, for the additional funds for that, that'd be the first place that we would work with to go there once the budget's approved.
Okay.
So that would be that lower interest.
And for long, 40-year
Yeah.
loans if you need it,
Right.
yeah.
Correct. And if you ended up doing the animal shelter and the Board of Elections bill, then all those things, you would only be talking about financing that one project if everything else is paid through the ARP funds.
Yeah, okay, good. My next question is, could we go ahead and do the facility study for the school system out of this year's budget instead of the one that we're looking at, just to get it done quicker? I don't know what the board thinks.
It's in this current budget, right? Which will be approved July 1, by July 1.
Yeah, facilities.
I was just
That we
wondering if
could go ahead and
get started early.
get started, I would
I
think.
think there's kind of a sense of urgency to know, to do that, so.
I'm sure, I mean, we could.
Y'all just take a look and see if you got
Do a
some.
budget amendment and we could go ahead,
Right.
if you all approved it at your next meeting, which would be June the.
Does he get paid on the front side or the back side?
July.
Does Perry get paid at the beginning of the process or the
It
end?
would be after, yeah.
Well, that shouldn't
Typically
matter.
after, because, he said 40 was his estimate, it won't go over 40, so it could be less.
I would be an agreement to go ahead and start it as soon as possible.
We did that kind of with the enterprise cars that time, we needed to get the cars ordered.
Mhm.
So you all went ahead and gave consensus to start that enterprise project, although it wasn't technically approved in the budget till July 1.
Okay.
Start the payments on them.
If we can do it that way, just whatever it takes to get it
We could say we could
started.
go ahead and get Perry started on that and then not technically, because he wouldn't send us a, he might not even be able to start on it until July, but if he went ahead and knew it was approved, he could put it on his calendar
Yeah.
at least to get us in.
Okay.
It's gonna take a while.
As soon as possible, just to get it started quicker. So.
Yeah,
Not wait.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, why was there a big, the next question is, why was there a big increase in the medical examiner? Did we change the way we're doing that or something? Because we did have the
A
EMS.
lot more. They had to have autopsies, which is 1,750.
Oh, okay. There's a requirement for increased autopsies.
And
There was more.
Yeah.
it was based on what we spent last year.
Okay.
There was a lot of money moved into there to cover what was spent, what was budgeted last year, and what we actually spent.
A lot of people died.
Yeah.
I know a bunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see it go down, like, next budget year, we could always take it back a little lower, but it was a pretty big increase from last year's as far as what we spent.
Okay, my next question is, there was a pretty big increase or expenditure for the Stokes Fire and Rescue Association. Did they buy a piece of equipment or something?
That was, is that when they paid off their?
That's where they requested, when they come and got approval to pay for the ESO
Yes.
system, that's going to be a reoccurring cost every year.
Oh, okay.
And I think maybe the radios.
Yeah, it might be the radios.
The radios that was in there.
Whatever they have in here is what was already previously approved here in their budget, and then they were paying off all of that, like 300,000 something in the debt from there.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
But that was we paid that in this year's.
But that ESO will be
It will
recurring.
be reoccurring.
Rick, I'm gonna stop you for a second,
Okay, that
just to
sounds
see
good.
if anybody else, before we get any further, if any other board members has any questions or input on what we've discussed so far about going ahead with the facility study for the school system, the finance, the lottery money, capital projects, anything, anybody have anything they want to add? Mr. Mendenhall, you have anything right now?
No, I'm good with the facility study for the school system to be moved up. I don't have a problem with that. And I guess my only other question, I was looking over your message, Ms. Shaver, and just to make sure I've got the right numbers, you're saying that our fund balance will probably wind up being between 18 and 20%, is that correct?
It would be 18 before the funds that were allocated from last year to balance the budget go back in. Once what we look like we're not going to use goes back in, even after this year's allocation, which will change some if we are taking some things and using them some more ARP funds for them. It'll wind up being back at 20%, maybe a little more.
Okay. And just to make sure, absolutely sure, I read over your message a couple times after I got out of the hospital. You can't read a budget. I spent 5 days in the hospital last week, so I didn't get much reading done until I got home. But so the final budget number is $49,118,782. Is that your recommended budget?
Yes, we'll change that number just a little bit because of those adjustments that I listed out in the beginning. Because of course the grant funds will increase that a little bit, even though those are reimbursable. They still up the budget a little bit, and there'll be a slight decrease on the EMS line item if you all are removing those 3 positions that we left in there by mistake. So it will change. It will change some, but we'll get a new number for you with those changes made from those adjustments.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right now, Madam Chair.
All right. Mr. Barney Castle, you got anything else right now?
And I'm good with the school study. Go back to the ARP money that Rick was talking about. I totally agree with that. Anything that we can take out of that and pay for it instead of financing. And all those grants, I know a lot of the fire departments, they don't apply for them because a lot of them 50/50 grants. Those fire departments don't have a lot of money laying around to come up and go
I guess that would be up to the board to decide if we wanted to help fund any of those.
No technical reason you couldn't do
There's not a
it.
technical reason, there'd just be if that's how
Just
you
be
want
if you wanted to do it or not. I think you could use it for that.
I know we have to go through the fire commission in order for them to address y'all only. I know some fire departments are looking for some grants, but right now, they won't apply for it, they're 50/50.
It'd be something we could consider if they wanted to make that request, I guess.
If we paid for the, can I ask a question? Right? If we paid for the animal, just using the budgeted numbers, assuming you can't get them down, if we paid for the election building and the election building and the animal shelter, how much would we have left for matching out of that 4 million or something?
Well, it's okay, you can do it, you can do it with your phone, I guess. So if you just take, if you take first do this one, do the 6.4 and deduct from it the 2,793,587.
2 million what?
793,587. Did that total first. And then from that, take the 1.3 million away from that, the shelter, and the 595,000 away for the Board of Elections, and just see what that leaves.
1.3.
Is the shelter, and then 595,000 is the Board of
Will leave
Elections.
you with $1,569.
So a little over 1.5 is what's left after if you
One
paid.
point, 1.5 million roughly left for doing matching.
Yeah, if you did those big things out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of worst case if the buildings cost as much as they're going to cost, so.
Yeah. I'd like to say things would start coming back to normal, but I don't know if it's gonna happen for a while. Building
Yeah.
costs are terrible.
Andy, do you have anything?
All right, Madam Chairman, thank you.
All right, so let me look back over what we've talked about so far. The ARP funding, yeah, I do agree that it's probably best to budget it or try to spend what we can so that you don't have to run the risk of the state reneging on it or trying to take it or something like that. As long as we're using it for things that are not reoccurring and, you know, it's, I think the matching grant or paying for the capital projects are a good use of it. So that stuff I do agree with. I'm fine with looking at the scope of the animal control, or the animal shelter just to see if that can be reworked. I don't know. You know, I don't think we've looked at it in enough detail to know if everything and all the bells and whistles that are there are needed or if it can be,
My
you
thought
know.
on it, Madam Chair, was that first of all, we own the land that's going on, if we put it in meadows, for instance. And then if we put it over there, we also have water and sewer already available. So yeah, I was just wondering if, given those kind of things, why it couldn't be cheaper.
I think there's so many things that I think Perry tried to be sure to give in that total, which like I say, can change as you get more specific on it, but trying to be sure we put the right kind of floor in the first time and don't have the issue we have over there with the peeling constantly. And
Yeah.
that floor is a huge cost. Everything has to be a certain material and texture, stainless things to be wiped down, you know, all of those different things. But one thing that you could do to reduce it, I'm sure, is I don't think it particularly has a lot of bells and whistles, but to have, you could cut the size of it, of course, would decrease the cost. But then you may be looking at having to add something later for size, because right now, I mean, anything's better than what we currently have. That space is just completely inadequate. It's so small and outdated. So, but we're just trying to look at building something that we won't have to redo again in a few years because we're out of space.
Well, for SciTech building, we put the infrastructure in it for 10,000 square feet more.
Right.
if ever needed, but it's got the, like the HVAC and everything for
Yeah.
that, so we could do an animal shelter, maybe modular, where you add more to it later and do the basic infrastructure. But there are state requirements with that too, I know, so.
That's, you have to be sure you're meeting all those as you're
Gotta,
building. so you
and
don't
that
have issues.
costs something, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we find a number we're pretty happy with and try to work around that too, if we can, it's doable. I mean, I know the costs are so crazy right now of everything. It's just
Things
skyrocketing.
still costing stuff up is everybody's so busy. So unless you got a long completion date on things like that in a year and a half, 2 years, you're gonna continue to get that. And Keith, I'm sure you see a lot of that too right now, don't you?
It's not coming down.
No.
One thing I can do on the animal controls that y'all asked me to bring in is, there's been recently other counties that's built them, so we can get a copy of the bids, what that thing is, what it is per square foot.
We've got a pretty good amount of stuff from, was it Catawba that we have there? Is Catawba?
Caldwell.
Or Caldwell.
Their
Caldwell.
plans.
We went to Caldwell. They're just finishing up theirs, and they were nice enough to give us all of everybody that responded to their RFP and the complete set of their building plans. So it's pretty good data too, but anything like that's appreciated to get. So,
But what's predicted is probably this fall, things are gonna crash.
yeah.
That's what everything's indicating. Okay. All right, and one question I have, and you even, I think, made a note in here about talking to us about the park situation, and we can talk about that now, or we can talk about it at another budget meeting, but, you know, I think, recently when we had to do that dugout, we kind of, made me think that we want to see if Walnut Cove is having interest in,
I spoke to them about that, and they're not in any position to stay taking over anything of that magnitude. They're already having an issue with trying to keep the park up that's beside them there that they technically don't own either. It's just kind of a thing that they've gotten tasked with. They have said a really quick note of that on anything to do with Lions Park. And I don't know, most everybody in here probably know a lot about how the park situation works and why we're in that situation as far as the 4 other parks besides Mortark. It was because of that grant that happened years ago, back in the late 70s, when they were receiving the grant, but the parks had to be deeded to the county in order to get those grants. In that turn, there were some agreements in place that the individual groups would still maintain the parks, like Lions Park, for instance, in Walnut Cove, the group that does Germantown, the Pinnacle Lions Park, and then the East Stokes one. The issue that you're having now is that a lot of the members of those groups are getting older. There aren't as many fundraisers able to do anymore, and the parks are just, some of them just not in really great shape. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an option of possibly even some of this ARP funds or something to be able to do a evaluation of those parks, go out and really have somebody look at them. Even somebody in our department could do that with Public Works, and you can see some of the things that need to be repaired and fixed. We actually have another issue at Lions Park with a sidewalk that's completely caved in from some foxes that dug under it, and it's caved out and it's not been repaired, so it's just kind of crumbling apart down there. Just to bring an assessment and see what it would take to get them back up to par, so they look nice and they're good parks for our communities to use. Because without some financial assistance, I'm not really sure how long they're going to even be viable. Some of them are in pretty bad shape. So.
well,
'Cause right now, all they do is they receive that $4,000. It was $2,000, and now it's $4,000 in operating expense money, which they use for all year power bills, mowing, things like that. They have to do for the parks. But other than that, there's no other. We completely take care of Mortark, which we're working on that some, get that a little better shape. But those are only that amount of money, which doesn't go real far as replacing things or playground equipment. Just sidewalks, everything that has to be done at those parks.
well, in my opinion, these groups that want these parks in their communities need to step up their end of the bargain too. I mean, I don't think it's the county's responsibility to maintain a park in every community or whatever. I mean, Mortark Park I see, and there does need to be some vast improvements, in my opinion, at Mortark Park. But, I mean, if we were partnering with these other entities, I think that needs to be what needs to continue. And that, you know, I'm fine with an assessment of it, just to see how bad things really are, but as far as figuring out if it's the county's responsibility to maintain everything,
I mean, technically, from the agreements that were put into place long ago, these are old agreements, I've been able to find a lot of those copies, is, you know, the county was only pretty much responsible for, it went into the county's name, and then the county pretty much leased it back to those organizations like Lions Club and things like that, and they were agreeing to maintain them, but they've just, the funds just have not been there in last years to do those things, so we just wanted to make you aware of that. And, you know, I mean, I guess at some point the county could have a conversation and talk about, you know, possibly, there's no reason for those to be deeded into the county anymore. All that stuff is long gone as far as those grants that were received because they had to go into the county's name. You know, they could essentially be deeded back, so they aren't technically possession of the county anymore. So,
One program we did before was we did at the same time we put in that operational funding. This has been many years ago, but we did a grant program where we put, I think, $10,000 aside. Yeah, and then we let them apply for grant funding from us to do specific projects, and then they had to do a match. And an in-kind could be part of that match too, but them actually doing the labor and stuff could be in-kind. We could look at doing that again and put a grant
some
fund
kind of
out.
program like that. I mean, it's just, it needs to be, I think,
yeah, I saw that in something that was suspended at some point and never put back in, but if we wanted to consider putting something like that
might work, but
It worked pretty well because we did several improvements.
well, and I
to
think
it.
some of what's happened in the last few years too is, you know, a lot of your parks did huge things like 4th of July events, things like that. I think some of the COVID restrictions and them not being able to operate some of their big fundraisers has sort of gotten them in a downhill effect of things started to happen. They didn't get that funds from this fundraiser, and then after that they weren't able to do certain things. So hopefully that will get some better as events are able to be held again, and they can start building those funds back to take care of them.
right. Does any other board members have comments or questions about that topic? Okay.
We'll just decide later what we're going to do on it.
I mean, I guess we could keep the amount of money in the budget the same for this budget.
The operational expenses is the $4,000 each.
Yeah.
But then as far as if you wanted to add anything like, you know, a grant program or something like that to look at, you know, then being able to apply for and match funds with.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Eric Collins here.
yeah, I saw him.
Yeah, we could go ahead and do that with, while he's here, we won't keep him any longer than need be. We'll jump to you. Come on up.
I'm just here to answer any questions that you guys have.
Well, I didn't get really far into the issue, so I'm going to let you talk about what you can with that and give them a rundown of what you're having and so.
I understand by Commissioner Nicholson, I had a couple of questions, I guess, before I got here about some turnover.
Well, it's sort of like what we talked about this morning of, is there enough overtime and issues with it, would look at more adding positions, but then, you know.
So, County Manager and I, of course, have had some conversations about trying to deal with some turnover that we've had recently. We've had a couple of officers going back into the private sector between going back to work security at a hospital to going back into construction, to go back to running a tree company, to the various things, and leaving the county to go back in that private sector looking for additional revenue for their, you know, I guess, personal well-being. So by no means do we fault them for that. Everybody's got to do what they got to do to survive personally. But obviously it is a concerning factor for us when we see people leaving. County Manager and I kind of trying to have some conversations about any, I guess, brainstorm any options that we could do to help these folks out. We realize the salary study was just passed recently, and so that's already in place. One thing that we did discuss is the possibility of paying for overtime versus comp time. You know, is that something that would be potentially available to the county to look at? I know we're in the budget process and trying to figure out monies and things like that. Currently, they do get comp time, and one of the challenges is of course trying to get that off. what good is the comp time if you're not allowed to take a vacation to go enjoy it when you're already short-staffed at different levels? Currently we have, one that's on maternity leave, one that's out on injury in the jail. We got a couple of out injuries in the patrol division. So you take those levels where we're at staffing-wise, and you take a couple out for extended periods of time for surgeries or whatever. We're utilizing full-time to try to help cover those shifts, as well as part-time officers if we have any. But those officers are like, okay, so I've got it in my comp time bucket, but I want to take this week off, and that's doesn't work out so well for them if we don't have the coverage. We're trying to honor as best that we can. Just to kind of give you a number, courtesy of Ms. Gale back here, we met with her this morning. She was kind of able to get a report pulled just to give us an idea of what we're talking about here. For the report that she pulled from July 1 to current day, the number of comp time hours accumulated by the sheriff's office side.
Ronnie's?
Yeah, someone said it was
Getting dispatched somewhere.
Well, so was it
This
here?
is fire department page. But the number of comp time hours accumulated by the sheriff's office from July 1 to current is 979 hours is the report that she pulled. From the jail standpoint was 694 hours is what they pulled there. So knowing that
What was the first one?
979,
For non-jail?
that is for the sheriff's office, yes.
Yeah, non-jail, okay.
So just using a rough number, I just used $30 an hour because you're talking time and a half was what we were talking about. So just as a rough number, using that 30 was 29,370 is currently where we're at right now, if you were to use that number. And for the jail, if you used the $30 number, was 20,820. Again, granted, it's all relative to the person you're talking about, time and a half when you talk about the patrol position versus the sergeant position or whatever in their pay grades. It does not apply to exempted employees. It only applies to those that are still in the salaries, I guess hourly type wages. So lieutenants and up do not get comp time since we're in that exempted section. So that's just something trying to look at a potential help, because obviously everybody's trying to financially make it in this climate right now. And so we see what's happening, but we also see a concern that basic law enforcement training at the community college is not producing officers. That's just, no one's really fighting to get in the career much right now. And so all departments around us are fighting to get what they can get at this point. So retention is a big deal, trying to hang on to what we got as well. So we're just trying to do the best that we can to provide the service here, and as well as look after the officers. I realize they've got to make a living too. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if this right here was to go through and we was able to get them the overtime pay, do you see that number of the turnover rate coming down? I mean, after speaking to some of them, or are they just looking to leave anyway?
Well, we have a lot that's committed to Stokes County because they live here, so they're invested in the community. Obviously, we have some that may not live here, so it's a little, they look at other options as well to see what's there. I do think it's going to help some, but kind of like what you guys were talking about a while ago, everybody's watching the economy right now.
Yeah.
So depending on what happens in the White House is affecting everything with our economy right now. So, these guys are doing the best that they can, here trying to make a living. So we're just trying to do what we can, but we realize that depending on what happens in the future, next budget cycles, there may have to be some more conversations about different things.
Well, I hope and pray that we do not see another weekend like you guys seen this past weekend, but
Yes, sir, I agree.
obviously, and it sounds like crime is going to be on the rise because your gas price is so high, people stealing, but it sounds like, people also killing right now. So
The things that we're trying to, really combat is, vehicles that are sitting in places, makes them subject to getting their gas tanks siphoned out and things like that. So that, there are little things like that you're also trying to, your patrol guys are trying to patrol these businesses and these schools and things like that have these vehicles sitting out there when they're not answering calls, as well as your schools that have tanks there. And it's just, a lot that's put on these guys, and they're doing the best that they can. But they also got wives and husbands and children to feed as well.
exactly. Yeah. That's definitely something I definitely want to look into then on this budget and see if there's something we can do to somewhat help try to fix this problem. I mean, at least try to get a jump start on it, but I do appreciate the information you brought forward to us on it.
I know, I saw a press conference where, Police Chief in Winston was talking about how I saw their recent graduate class, and when my son graduated like 7 years ago, it's like maybe a third of the amount of officers that they had, and she said this is not, don't even put a dent in the retirements to cover what's coming out. Just this graduating class. I mean, it's just no, you know, I think we can thank the media for that, and some, not all the media, but social media, and some of what we've seen with vilifying police officers. It's just made it to where people don't. I mean, it's hard. It was hard anyway, and it's just become harder. And you know, with my son being a police officer, I get it because he gets comp time at Winston, and it's hard to be able to take it because they're shorthanded, and so he's in that exact same boat you're talking about. So, you know, anything we can do to help retain good employees, because that keeps you from having to retrain new employees.
Absolutely.
And if you can keep the good ones you've got that are already you've invested in them, you know, that's much better than having to start all over.
Absolutely.
So that to me is a big thing, and it's not probably just your department either. I feel like if we do this here, there's other departments we're going to have to look at, just like some of the social worker positions earn comp time and they're shorthanded and they don't get to take it either.
I will give you one
Yes.
positive update, so everything's not doom and gloom when somebody comes before you, but we've been down 4 positions for a pretty good while in the jail. We've been able to hire 3 positions. As of right now, we got 1 in jail school, hired 2 new ones, and then we've got a 4th application that we're in the process of working on, and a potential part-time applicant that's interested in at least doing part-time until a full-time position comes open. So with that being said, that should hopefully get us back to full staff in the jail, which is rare for the state of North Carolina right now. Forsyth is down like 70 officers. We're just blessed that some folks have decided to look into that and giving it a shot. So we're excited about that. What that also will do is we've been able to open up housing additional inmates from those other sources because our staffing is going back up. We can now bring the inmate population back up of rented out beds. We've had to reduce that because of COVID and staffing for safety and the staff and as well as make sure we can meet our state obligations. So with the staffing getting back up, we're now, I think we picked up 2 from Iredale and 2 from other counties already. So just in 2-day period, I've had 4 from other counties being assigned to Stokes County for their misdemeanor confinement time to hopefully get that revenue source back up in the jail to help you guys
Yeah,
as well.
that's good
See
too.
if we can get some money back in that as well.
At that rate, how much money annually would that bring in roughly?
So the first year when our staffing was good, we were about 800 and some thousand, give or take. This year, you're going to be about 550 or 515, 520,000, just because of the reduction. Now, granted, you may not see it immediately because Tracy used to help me out. She knows we stay kind of a month behind misdemeanor confinements. June money will come in at the end of July. DOC's money will come in at the end of July, things like that. But when it's all said and done and washes out, it should be about 515,000, give or take, is what the jail will bring in this year. The payment is either 233 or 266. I can't remember one or the other.
They're 30-something, I think.
30 something, and it always makes the payment even in the reduced years.
That's what we were worried about. It doubles the payment. We're good, so.
Yeah, so but I figure if we can keep our staffing getting it back to the level it's supposed to be, then we'll be back up to the 800,000, give or take, hopefully somewhere in that range, if not a little bit more.
It's almost like it's a no-brainer. You got to keep the revenue is going to far outweigh what you need to do to keep the employees there. You got to keep the employees, keep the revenue stream.
Right.
So,
Yeah, every time you're down one, you can't take as many inmates in.
right.
There's some new state guidelines too that when you lose a person like a detention officer, the new state guidelines, it takes almost 6 weeks to get somebody back in from all the things that they have to do to even come to work. So that's.
Go ahead.
So let me ask, let me see if I understand what you're saying. Then what if we temporarily, we got to either go by our policy or temporarily disband or depart from it or whatever. But if we temporarily started paying overtime instead of comp time, based on the specific need there, especially if it's going to generate revenue that would offset it by having additional inmates. I mean, it's like Sonny said, that's like a no-brainer to do that. But would that solve the problem if it was, or do we need to change the policy somehow about comp time versus overtime?
You can temporarily do it, however, we've temporarily done it in the jail before and have done it even recently. It was signed off on a long time ago, and then it was signed off on to do when they have to, because they have to keep that jail covered. But in order to do something long-term, we'd need to change the policy, just like we changed for the EMS policy, and we had to even change their way we paid them to make that work eventually, as far as changing them to an hourly rate to make that
Exactly.
figure
So
right.
yeah, that's kind of
So
where
it
I'm
would be a
headed.
policy change.
Are we going to run into any labor department issues?
I had it, when we first started this conversation, we started it back here in the HR office today, and they've been working on that all day, trying to make sure that there was nothing against them being able to pay any type of overtime over the 40 hours worked like we do with the EMS for the sheriff's office. And I'm supposing since they gave you those numbers, they came out to the conclusion that last when I talked to them, they were still making sure, but.
She didn't verify that.
Okay.
I just knew at one point the 168 is what we're at, and that we were kind of in a different bracket.
Yeah,
I think we definitely got to do
How that
something.
worked with the
Oh,
168
absolutely,
for us.
yeah.
Do something, and especially if it generates additional revenue that offsets it, then it
Right,
makes no sense
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
not to do it. So, but then your other comment about the other departments, we've got to be even across the board on this.
Right.
Or other departments if they're in the same situation. But if they're not, then we don't need to do anything to them.
No, yeah, I mean, some people are able to earn their comp time and actually
Yeah.
use it in place of their vacation time every year, and then save their vacation, and when they retire, whichever, or if they leave, unfortunately, they're paid out for that vacation time, so they're able to use their comp time. But there are some, like you say, in your situation, and others that just can't ever use up all the comp time that they earn.
And that's why it'd be better not to change the policy, but to do something, an exception or something to,
If we can keep the
Just
staffing
like
at
this.
the level, like I said, hiring everybody to jail now, we do find ourselves having to send people to jail school. So that puts you down, and like I said, I got one on maternity leave, one with a knee issue and things like that. But also, if we can keep our staffing up there, then this 694 number is going to reduce down to 300 to 250 to whatever, just because with so many vacant positions and trying to find people to work in those positions, it's required more officers to work on their days off and things like that. So hopefully by hiring these new ones and get them embedded into the system and enjoying what they're doing, then this won't be as much of an issue inside the jail facility as well. But we run that same thing, like I said, for patrol. I mean, you got, like I said, one's out on injury, but you could take anything can happen. Just like I said, having one of my officers is in the jail is out on maternity leave.
is there any problem getting inmates as long as we have the staff? Is there plenty of them waiting to come?
The state of North Carolina is excited that we open the doors back up.
Okay. So there's no risk of not having
Like I
inmates?
said, us hiring this, we're one of the few in the state that's going to be fully manned. So, like I said, Forsyth is down 70, Charlotte Mech is down like hundreds of officers out there in their facility. So, I mean, a lot of the jails had to do the same thing that we did when COVID hit and staffing became issues. Had to contact the state and say, hey guys, we're just not going to be able to take any of your folks right now. And so then it became very difficult for them to find housing. So the fact that we've opened the doors back up, they're sending it to us as hard as as many as we're willing to take. So,
Okay, good.
and, so anyway, it's just, but there is some good news. There is some
Yeah.
silver lining there. So
Let me
we'll pass that
ask-
on as well.
Mr. Barney Castle and Mr. Mendenhall, if they have any questions for you before you leave. Go ahead.
You,
Yes.
you,
Uh-huh.
I've read something what, you and Commissioner Marsh talking about. Matter of fact, I got a call on this issue yesterday about the shortage of deputies in our county. A lot of y'all are not out of the county like I am, been in the fire department. I won't say the numbers, but a lot of times at night, we'd rather be shot, we'd rather sleep with a gun beside your bed. No one, how many deputies is out in this county as big as it is? I think it's a safety issue for us, and more so for them as well. If the overtime pay is the issue, I say, we do it to help them out, like we did the EMS. everybody with EMS leaving now, I think we got people waiting to come here. So, anything I feel like they need, these people are protecting us day and night, 24 hours a day. We've got to be good stewards of them. We have that for the citizens as well.
Yep, I agree. Mr. Mendenhall, can you hear us?
I can, and I think Eric did a very good job of explaining that. So, Eric, I have no questions for you, and I appreciate your input.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, we'll be discussing this further. Thank you. Okay.
Just get Shannon to make a recommendation on that to us the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, we can, do you want us to bring that to a regular commissioners meeting coming up on June 13th? Or do you want us just to make the changes within this budget in their overtime? Or which do you prefer? Do you want to go ahead and handle it that way and look at the policy changes that need to take place at your regular meeting?
Yeah,
They verify all
that would
that
probably be
FLSA.
good. Look at the, see if there's any
Yeah,
policy
if there's a
changes.
sense of urgency about doing
Yeah,
it.
because then we need to adjust the budget either way if we're going to do paid overtime versus
We're gonna try not to do a policy change, right?
comp time. But we need to just check with HR. They're, like I said, I've had them checking on that today because we just started discussing this just a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
Policy and on the FLSA.
could bring it, since we'll have another budget meeting before we have a commissioners meeting, I think,
If
so.
we've got any new information on it, then we'll bring it in and talk about
Into
it. But if
budget.
it have to be changes, yeah, because we'll have to adjust everything anyway to put that in.
Right, and I agree that if we can do it without a policy change, that's better, but, we'll have to just look at that, and you may even have to talk to Ty about it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
What about other departments besides sheriff? Do you know right now of some others that are gonna fit right into this as well?
I mean, the only department I can think of offhand, we've already, corrected the situation through EMS. This would be sheriff's office and the jail. The only other thing I could think of would be some positions within DSS. I wouldn't say all of DSS. I would say a lot of the CPS and workers like that accrue a tremendous amount of
Okay.
And I know at one time there were some of the community assistants that worked in the foster care.
That's what I'm thinking of.
We eventually added a new position to that because it got to what you had said earlier. And it was
cheaper
It covered it
to-
to have the position rather than all the overtime. So that might be something to look at again there. I know I'm requesting and recommending a couple of positions in DSS in one department because they are so overworked and they have such a large caseload. But as far as that department, I know that I have to check with Stacy and see.
Right, let me
their
ask
comp
this,
time averages look like.
'cause I think this is gonna make a difference too, it might be, before I forget it anyway, so the Medicaid, Medicare stuff changed with the state, which is gonna increase their workload, I would think. And so that may be something else you wanna talk to Stacy about as far as, will this increase in personnel, I don't know that it'll be enough to cover it. With what do they anticipate with this change in the law? We briefly talked about at our DSS board meeting the other day, how that might impact them, and that did, I think, pass
Yeah.
in the state. So that'll be more, of course, there's probably not any funding from the state to increase their, personnel, that don't never work that way. They'll give them more work, but no more people. So
And we'll look into as far as other departments, but that's the only other department that I can think of.
that's the only one I could really
offhand
think of.
That would be accruing a tremendous amount of comp time.
Right. And that may have alleviated itself by hiring another person since it,
We fixed that last year with solid waste. There was an issue with a ton of comp time there. With those, they couldn't take off, and we added that additional position, and that's corrected that issue. So,
are we still down a position in IT?
yes,
Okay.
we are.
Are they, is it still out there advertised or
It is,
not posted?
no, it's not posted. We've discussed that several times and asked them to post that position, but it's not been posted to date yet.
That sounds like something we might need to work on with all these cyber attacks and everything. You don't want to have,
There were a few department heads in the requested budget that requested communications, emergency management, and another department, and DSS requested additional personnel in their departments just to handle some IT things that they need completed that they're having issues with. So I didn't recommend those because my hope is that they're going to fill that position and
Over here, and that'll take care of it.
Take over what that is.
It'd be good to get some kind of analysis of which way is the best way to do it, whether they need to be here or it would be better for them in the departments. I think other counties, they have them in the departments.
Most counties have, most
Besides
counties have
the
a public
IT.
safety person that is just IT
Yeah.
public safety, and they do everything for the public safety department because they have so much all the time. So a lot of them do.
Right.
Y'all look at that and tell us which way, and get Diana's input, of course,
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
how she thinks it would work the best.
You might want to look at what other counties that would have departments around our same size are doing in that regard too.
I think between our entire public safety here, you could certainly keep somebody busy
Yeah,
with all that
that
they
amount.
have going on. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's go back to Rick's, list of questions.
About
Probably about
out.
halfway through it, huh?
I'm about done.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we've ended up talking about most of the
Okay.
stuff.
Okay.
I did have a question, just a curiosity, on page 84, the Regional Sewer Fund, and then before page 4 of that, I think, is Danbury, or afterwards.
84.
84 and 86, I think.
Okay.
On the Regional Sewer Fund, we have, it looks like ARPA's buying the stuff, on the notes down there, filtration system.
Samplers and the grinder.
Grinder, yeah. And then on Danbury, where the ARPA's not doing it, is there a reason for it's doing one, not the other? It's got 3 items there too.
Corrosion control filtration system.
Yeah, software upgrade and pallet jack for the Danbury Water Fund. I just wondered why ARPA did one and not the other, if there's some
Well,
reason for that.
so it was sort of up in the air over if ARPA could do any of them.
Okay.
Because the enterprise funds work a little different.
Mhm.
So our hope is, and we had, I think you all had maybe
We're
asked
researching.
researching the question on that, on if we buy just like the grinder for the jail, that's gonna be a spare. If that ever goes out, it's a huge ordeal. So we wanted to have a spare on hand for that reason. If the county bought those materials with their ARPA funds and pretty much put them into the regional sewer fund, is that allowed? Because technically, we don't think that you could purchase them with the enterprise fund money. So we put those in there for that one, but didn't do it in the Danbury water until we can get some clarification on if that is an okay use of
If
those
it's okay,
funds.
you would go ahead and do Danbury the same way?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
that's what I'd recommend.
Yes. We
Make
just,
it-
that was one that they didn't exactly say you could do it with the enterprise funds like they did the other that we're talking about, like using it for revenue replacement.
Yeah.
But
But they're both enterprise funds.
Right, they are.
So they should, if you do
yeah,
one, you
so
should be able to do
think
the other,
we
right?
put it in the regional fund and started rethinking a little bit, didn't go back and take it out, and didn't do it in the Danbury one. But I'm
Okay.
hoping we can just leave it alone and
It'll be
those-
consistent one way or the other.
one way or the
by
other. It'll
time
be
we're
ARPO or
finished.
it won't be.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yep. I hope we can do it all from there.
All right. You have anything? Go ahead, Rick.
I think that's all I had, I think, for now, Madam Chair.
I kind of want to see what the public,
Back through.
the meeting we have the public come here
Yeah,
to speak before I
yeah.
really go into detail on anything.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, and, can y'all print for us the, full school board request?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you emailed it to us, but can you print
And
it?
we can put it on the website too, so it's on there. But yeah, we can give you, if you can wait around when we're done here today, I've got it saved. We can print you a quick copy of it.
Okay, because I was wanting to look at that, whole request. And as far as just a general, I guess, comment on the school's request, you know, looking at it, there's about 19 million of HVAC in that, and I don't know if it would be something that we could do. You know, it wouldn't be my recommendation to try to fund 19 million in HVAC at one time. There's some of those things that could go out tomorrow and some could last another 5 or 10 years. So, but what we could do and think about doing is a contingency fund, which we already sort of have an emergency fund or contingency fund for school related things, but we could even get down to a specific HVAC contingency. I just want them to know the money's there if it goes out in the middle of the year, of course, but funding all of it when it still may have some life in it, doesn't seem like the best use of funds to do them all at one time. But if you take out the 19 million out of that request of HVAC and just fund one or two a year or something that seems more doable, than replacing them all at one time that they sent up here. But I think there's some things that maybe can be repaired and utilized a little longer, has more life left in them. I don't know. That's something we can talk to them about, of course, when they meet with us. But and also looking at a 5, 10, and 15-year plan of how they want to, if they are choosing to consolidate any schools or leave school, plan to keep them all open. That's the kind of feedback we need from them. It's all one of those chicken and egg things. Who it came first, the chicken or the egg? They want us to tell them stuff, but we need them to tell us stuff. So, I'm willing to work with them, however, because when I was on the school board, I wanted to be able to make those decisions because that's what we were charged with on the Board of Education, was things that are, what's educationally best practice for these kids. And, I think that's what they're elected to do. So that's why I feel like the ball's in their court to make those calls, and for us to try to do our best to fund their requests to the point of, are the people in the county willing to see a tax increase for some new schools in the future? I think that's going to have to be put before the people at some point, because we can't just keep going down the road with the aging schools that we have, but we can't replace them all at one time either. So a 5, 10, 15-year plan would be what I would want to look at with them going forward to address the problem. And that's really all I've got to say about their budget till we
14th.
Yeah, till we get to meet with them.
I have a couple comments on that I did have a question. I forgot to write it down that you reminded me of.
Good thing.
The one thing I would like to see is us go back, and Doug Carter recommended this a long time ago, and we did it for a while, but go back to having a 5-year capital plan for both the county and the school system. That would list every capital need you had, and then prioritize them over the years, and then use that document to track what we fund, and then let it flow from year to year to the next set of items and so forth. So, if that's something we could think about. The other thing, based on what you were talking about, consolidations and stuff, whatever long-range planning the school system is going to do, strategic planning for school consolidation or whatever other components of that plan might be, I would like to see them give us options, and one of the options is to leave everything like it is and tell us how much that's going to cost, and then develop whatever additional options they'd like to do for whatever their long-range planning is, and tell us how much those will cost, so we can compare the cost of doing something new compared to doing nothing and leaving everything like it is. If they would be thinking in those terms, that would be good, I think.
There's a school, and I think you all got a copy of it when they did it. They came up last year or year before and had you approve their 5-year plan. Do you remember that? And I've got it in a big binder, and if you need a copy of it, I think we can get a digital copy, I'm sure. But it's got one whole area of a 5-year plan, then a whole 10-year plan that was 2020 and 2021. It's like you said, it's by date of, this roof's going to need to be replaced in this.
Oh, okay.
It's laid out that same way. It's the school's plan that
They made them do it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I remember now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Different from this, what we're talking about,
What
doing
we're
the
talking about.
facility study. But this
Right.
has actually got the dates in it with
Yeah.
how long, they think they're going to be able to replace something. And there's a lot of the things that are in this current budget in that as well.
Okay.
Some of those same items are in there. course, the costs are a lot different because the costs are a lot different now than they were in 2020. When that
You
was-
have to update the 5-year plan every year and with the
Yeah, so
cost and
that's,
everything.
that is
so.
something that you do have there, so.
That'd get everything on the table so we could get the total picture. Last thing, would you explain what you said about their fund balance? You want to give it to them versus keeping it?
Yeah,
Here.
so in the, the current expense, of course, you know how that works, and in the capital, because that money is derived from the Article 40 and 42. And when they receive those funds each year, they get the amount of money that's in those taxes, their percentage. Well, taxes are held back, so when the budget year ends, you still got a few months each time coming in after the fact. So it causes them to build a bit of a fund balance here, which in turn sometimes has been used in emergencies and things like that. Last year we provided some of it to them, and I think the year before too. The recommended budget in here for the school system is to give them just about the entirety of that fund balance that's here, with the exception of about $40,000. And then also it would start to build back a little with what's held back, what'll come in these next couple of months. But that gets them to that 3.6 and some change recommendation in there to help fund some of those things. If you look at that budget, when I give that copy to you, a lot of their items go up to the 2.7 million, I think was going to be their original request before they decided to add in all the HVACs and the rest of it. So it would fund a lot of the capital request. But I just, and it's my opinion, so it's just my opinion, because you all can do something totally different. I just don't see, I think, they can take their money and spend it as they see fit anyway, so I'm not sure why we hold on to that money here. They can either build an emergency fund and leave some out if they want to, or use it to fund a lot of these things that they're going to need to fix and repair.
Yeah, their capital usually has $100,000 emergency in it right at the top line, if I remember right.
Yeah, usually.
I agree
so.
with that philosophy you just said. That's what was my philosophy when I was here before.
Yeah, I mean, I just, it's here and
It's their money. So.
Correct, and the longer we don't repair and fix some of the things that they need to fix, they're only getting worse by the time. So if they could take that 3.6 this year and put it towards 25 items on that list that they have prioritized, that's 25 items that are not going to be in worse shape next year, or, fund more of them that you can. So.
And then they would hold some of it for emergencies.
Yeah, I mean, and they're still going to be
The hope that they would.
Yeah, but there's still going to be the $40,000 that we didn't pull from it, plus whatever comes in from Article 40 and 42
I'm fine
we
with
just saw in April, May, and June. That will be here as well if something else were to happen.
I'm fine with that. I agree with your recommendation on that.
That's all. I think we've covered everything I had written down, and the only other thing, I don't know if we want to throw this out there now, but the fact that that there's been a talk of a COLA, and it's kind of late in the game to start talking about that in this budget. I feel like, because we've already kind of built this budget without that. But do you have the numbers on what that would look like?
So I didn't, a lot of times when we have our budget goal session prior to starting to work on the budget, the board will say if they'd like to see anything like a COLA in the budget. And I didn't hear that in our budget work session, so we didn't put the COLA in. I thought about it a lot and probably would have honestly tried to put in a 2%, but once I got that fund balance down to 18, even just doing all the recurring things, I just didn't feel like I could put it in there and drive the fund balance down more than 18 at that point. So I wanted to kind of get your feedback on that to see if you're interested in seeing what it would cost to do a 2%. We ran some preliminary numbers. These are not exact, but Lisa's got a sheet over there that's got what it would cost if you did just a 2%.
2%, just a rough ballpark figure, was $357,951.
The last part, 357 what?
951.
Have you had several department heads mention this, or just a couple, or?
Well, I mean, I think it's an across the board. I mean, I've had a few to mention it, but it's across the board of everybody, and it's not that I wouldn't want to add it. I'm all for anything that helps our employees. I know things are terrible right now. Everybody is spending triple what they used to spend.
Oh,
on
yeah,
gas to
no
come back
doubt.
and work to work. Grocery store trips are more. Everything costs more. So I really, if we can make that happen, would be wonderful. But I certainly didn't want to make it part of the recommended budget because then we'd be talking more like a 17% fund balance, and I was really trying not to get too far away from that 20%. That was one thing I did hear in the budget goals.
Well,
session.
and I think you've heard in the budget goal session that we wanted to not have tax increase, and
Right.
adding something that's reoccurring is something that we have to wonder about, driving it up later on.
Yeah, 'cause
And I think we were on the heels of the salary study that gave everybody an increase, as well as a Christmas bonus. And were there 2 bonuses last year?
There was a hazard and
Hazard
essential
pay.
pay bonus. Some got hazard, some got essential. And then there was the Christmas one that was all within that same time frame of the salary study. And then when we started looking at the numbers of last year we didn't have to do a health insurance increase, it stayed flat. This year they recommended we did that 5%.
Did that 5%?
Which also cost us $224,000. Retirement went up for regular, all employees, plus a pretty good increase for the law enforcement employees. So those 2 items together almost totaled what the COLA would be. So, I didn't put it in the recommended budget. I would love to put it in there, but I just didn't because I thought it was just getting too far away from what we were asked to do.
I have a question, and this is from memory, tell me if I'm wrong or right. I thought the salary study gave a automatic 2% increase per year for every individual
It does.
annually.
It does.
What is that called?
Longevity.
Longevity, not COLA.
Longevity. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's 2% no matter what. Before our old salary schedule was a 1%, and then at certain anniversary points, you got like at a certain 5-year mark, you got 3 steps, and you got that. It took a long time. It was the way that salary schedule worked with the A and the Bs. It would take you 60 years to work your way through your pay schedule. With the new one, 2% each year on the minimum. At the end of 30 years, if you stayed in the same job, you would be at your maximum. If you started out further into your pay schedule, you get to your maximum sooner. Some people are at their maximum already after the salary study who had been here for a long time. So they're working their last years before they retire at their maximum rate.
Yeah.
So that would never have happened in the old schedule. So yeah, that 2%. It is off the minimum, but it was off the minimum before too, under the old schedule.
And it's 2% for every employee every year,
On their anniversary
automatic.
date, automatically.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that's continued on just like, so that already was more, like I said before, like I said, it was 1% except for those special anniversary dates.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's more information than we had.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's still something to consider, but there's a lot of factors to consider, and there's a lot of unknowns. And like you said, the impending crash that we don't know what the future holds, but it's not looking bright.
Hope we're wrong, but it ain't looking that way.
Well, we're still staying conservative on some of the numbers. I mean, our numbers have indicated an increase along the way on some things, but we've still kept it lower and kept a lot of numbers actual. And like I said in the beginning, the goal is to not do a million budget amendments. We want to make this a really factual budget so that we're telling you honest, true numbers that are not going to surprise later. And so
Right.
actually that costs this much more than that, and then it's there. But I want to make sure too that I've got a clear picture of what we're going to bring back. And I know we have our public hearing Monday, and that might also bring up things that we need to come back with on the 9th. That we're going to look into holding some of these funds for grant matches. We're going to look closer at the animal shelter building to see if any of that could be downsized a little and still get a good result out of it. We're going to get that turnover analysis by department, including the reasons that people left since the salary study date. We're going to move this green box funds, the leftovers, to the ARP funds. On the 4-cent fund, we're going to verify that about the lottery funds, whether those are flowing through there. On the looking at any other positions that are receiving a lot of overtime, if they could justify adding a position. We talked about, I think, and I got a consensus to go ahead and give Perry the green light to start the building study for the schools, the facility study. Go ahead and get them on our calendar.
Yeah.
I think we explained that fire increase with the AOS, is that, or the EE? Yeah, is everybody?
I'm
okay
good with that. I'm good
okay
with it.
that? We'll get a new budget number that Commissioner Mendenhall was asking about once we make those changes with the ARP funds and add in those grants and add in those adjustments, and we'll get you a new number
Okay.
for the next meeting. We're looking at, Wayne asked the question about fire departments matching grants. We'll just keep that on our radar to talk about that a little bit. Of course, Eric came and provided that info from the sheriff's office that I was hoping that he would.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna check about other agencies that might have issues with, comp time overages, and I'll talk to Stacy about that at DSS. Talk about a public safety IT person possibly with Diana, if that would be a feasible thing to use for that third position. The regional sewer and the Danbury water, to clarify that those things can come from there, or ARP, and whichever one we land on, they'll both be from one or the other. We'll fix that in there. And I'll get you all copies of the school board, requested copies of that. And then we're talking about that 5-year capital plans for all of it. Is there anything I missed that anybody?
I think that was,
Uh-oh.
is it storming outside?
Looks like
I was
it.
pointing at you just a second ago, look outside.
Yeah, it looks like it's coming.
Stuart texted and said some windows are down in the parking lot and it's raining. So I'm not sure whose window he's.
Uh-oh.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I'm only a half inch. Just one quick question before you go. Are you doing anything else on looking at ARP funds, spending them and doing it for, or does everybody have any questions about that, or?
I don't think so. And I mean, if we want to look at, we can.
We just need to decide if we want to do it or
How we
not.
want to spend the rest of those remaining funds.
You like the idea of doing it, doing matching funds plus spending the rest of it?
Yes. That way there's
Okay,
no chance we lose them.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I think that
agree.
helps us moving forward in the next budget too.
yeah.
All those things for, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, like some information on the city.
Oh, yeah, gives a, just
And we can
a,
verify that number too, of the cost.
Gone.
Yeah, cut 'em off.
Yeah. Is there anybody got anything else?
no.
Maybe we can get to the cars before it.
No.
Okay. All right, and I'm,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Say aye. Aye.
Wayne's it raining there?
Is it raining at your house, Wayne?